being so smart and knowing so much about Supernatural, those are mutually exclusive things. Yeah. Hello and welcome back to Super Hell, aka the Mystery Spotcast, a show where two recovering Supernatural fans subject themselves to a rewatch so no one else ever has to watch Supernatural again. I'm Klaudia, my pronouns are she, her, and you can find me on social media at Klaudia Says, K-A-L-U-D-I-A Says.
And I am Ollie. I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh. That's Fresh with a PH.
Today.
Oh my god.
Today.
Guys.
We did it, Joe.
We're so fucking close. I can feel it. When I saw that after I finished the episode we are going to talk about in today's episode on Netflix, it popped up, and the next episode I have to watch is Lazarus Rising Season 4, Episode 1. I basically jumped out of my seat.
I had to stop myself from playing it because I was ready to go.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my god, it's time. It's time.
So today we are covering the finale of season 3 of Supernatural, and if you haven't been listening before, that is the final episode before Lazarus Rising, aka the introduction of Destiel, one of the only good parts of Supernatural. So our next episode will be incomprehensible. This episode we will try to be comprehensible.
We'll keep it together for you guys.
Unlike a normal episode where we cover 2 episodes of Supernatural, when we do a season finale, which we've now done 2 before, we're just going to talk about the season finale. We're going to talk about the season as a whole, to prepare ourselves. And
I can't believe that we've only had 2 finales. I feel like we've been making this show for 8 years. But
you know what? And we're clipping along. We're getting there. And the other piece,
probably because we keep taking hiatuses.
Yeah. Well, and also season 3 is half as long as the rest of the seasons because of the 2008 writer strike. And we will be talking about the 2008 writer strike quite a lot today, considering.
Oh, you better bet your ass we will.
This episode is a case study in, okay, so the writer strike was coming. Got it.
Yeah. It's a case study in, okay, yeah, no, you guys clearly did what you could with what you had.
Yeah. But before we begin, I would like to harken back to our second episode, because a wonderful listener, who I will not say their name because I don't want to put them on blast, but a wonderful listener sent in a recommendation. So if you remember our second episode where we talk about the second episode of Supernatural, that episode is named after a monster of folklore and legend that we chose not to say the name of because there are some native cultures who they try not to invoke it.
They try not to invoke it, but another thing too is that a lot of indigenous cultures are a bit insular and are like, these are our legends and it's not for you.
Yeah. And
white people and non-native. So I'm kind of like, we didn't want to invoke it.
Well, and so basically, the season 1, episode 2, that one, when we talked about it, it's a very supernatural thing of like, we're taking something from someone's culture and we're just going to bastardize it. They're pretty equal opportunity about that, as we have said about when they talk about various pagan gods as well. It's insulting to everyone. But when we talked about it, one of our listeners sent in a wonderful episode of another podcast, called Meti in Space, where they take a native perspective on different basically episodes of TV, movies, books, that kind of thing, where there is like a native person or like concept or reference or something, and they watch or they read or they play that thing, and then they kind of analyze it and be like, was it good? Was it bad? Does it matter? Whatever. So they talked about that specific episode of Supernatural. And we're going to link to that episode of their podcast in our show notes if you want Native and First Nations, because they're Canadian. Actually, the land known as Canada, they suck too. They have a perspective on they have basically to have a native perspective on that episode. And I actually have listened to that episode of their podcast. It's really good. They skip around. I think at one point they talk about Star Trek. They talk about a lot of things, but that episode is cool because one of them is a fan of Supernatural and has seen Supernatural, and one of them is not. And they said a lot of the same things that we did, where we were like, damn, this show is really just about these 2 men having daddy issues and talking about their feelings. And I was like, yeah. pretty much.
It's about daddy issues, and then occasionally is really, really racist. So
yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, and one interesting thing that they said in their episode was like there aren't any actual native people in that episode. Like sometimes you'll have this like racist trope of like, here's the one native person. Oh, they did it in the Bugs episode, actually. Which we talked about the complexity of that, but like here's like one native person or one person from marginalized identity who's going to explain the legend or the lore to you, and then there's no native people in the rest of it. There was not even a native person in this. They just mentioned it, and they were like, yeah, it's a thing, whatever. And they kind of talked about like, you know, what's accurate, what's not, whatever. I don't know. I thought it's very cool. And then you can get a little taste back of season 1. But yeah, you can listen to that in our show notes. And we're going to get right into the season 3 finale.
Here's a season 3 finale. I'm sorry. It's ultimately a very dramatic episode, but I was laughing my ass off for like the entire second half, which I feel bad about because I remember watching it the first time when I was like a teenager and I didn't know what the writer's strike was. Like I think I'd seen about it on TV, but like I didn't really know what it was. But I was watching it after this season had come out, and the next season like there were already multiple seasons after this. It's not like I watched it live.
Yeah.
But I remember it feeling really dramatic, and I was like, this episode's so good, and it has like a 9.2 rating on IMDb.
It
and
does?
I trust IMDb. Yeah, you can trust IMDb as far as you can throw it, like, in terms of ratings. But, like, I was like, I remember this episode being so good, and I'm watching it now, and maybe it's just because, like, when I was a child or a teenager, whatever, I was watching it, and I was so deeply obsessed with the show that I didn't register that it was stupid. But watching it now, I was like, there's some really good acting and some really good lines.
Really good acting.
Fucking hilarious.
Like,
it was so funny.
I mean, if you've noticed from our like past 2 season finales that we've covered, like usually they try to do like a 2 or 3-parter as the season finale, and it was very clear in this one that they tried to fit all that into one episode. So it felt like 3 different things all coming together and at the same time. And like usually a supernatural episode is like monster of the week plus we're dealing with our psychological problem with each other meshed together. But this was like our psychological problem with each other, and then also Dean is dying, and then also not the monster of the week, but the monster of the season, and we're all putting it in together. And do we have enough time? No, we don't. But by the end, it's wild and crazy. The pacing is wild.
You can tell that because this season was only 16 episodes, and normally it's like 21 to 22, you can tell that those extra like 4 episodes, like you can tell exactly where they were like, oh fuck, we're gonna go on strike.
Yeah,
like exactly where it started, because suddenly they were like, oh my god, Lilith is here, and you learn like every single thing about Lilith that clearly should have been spaced out over the course of a couple episodes, but they were like, we gotta hit the road, we gotta hit the ground running. Yeah,
there's a moment with Bobby, and we'll get to it, where they just inexplicably like, they're like, Bobby's like, all right, I got it, and I've got the way to do this thing, and I'm like, not like they don't do this all the time. Deus Ex Bobby, where like,
Deus Ex Bobbyna,
where like, or Bobby, or really anybody where someone comes in and is like, oh, I have the perfect spell or this or that, but like suddenly Bobby is like, he's like, yeah, I can summon anything with the right thing and whatever, and you're like, this probably would have needed a little more explanation if we had a little more time. But I mean,
no, because I'm also thinking there's something in that. We'll get to it when we talk about it, but there's a part where Bobby is like, I can find a demon. And I'm like, why didn't Ash know how to do that? When they were looking for...
Why didn't John?
Looking for the yellow... No, literally, I'm like, Bobby could just have figured that out. He clearly did not like John. He was like, fuck you, John. I'm not going to figure this out for you, you dumb slut.
Or John didn't want to work with other people, as we know. And so it's very, John, why don't you call Taylor up? Why don't you call Bobby up? Like, I think John just was like, I gotta go my own way. Like, he really felt like he had to do everything himself, so he never asked for help, even though every other hunter asked for help, because John's just a dipshit. As we've covered, he needed therapy.
This is just one example, and we'll like talk about it more when we actually get to it in the episode, but there are just so many things in this episode that are like, oh, okay, I guess we can do that now. I guess that works. Okay. Yeah, sure.
The knife.
well, okay, but at least the knife was set up. We'll talk about it. Let's get into it.
Okay.
I think I'm talking about this episode, so this is so exciting. So, okay, the first thing. I gotta bring it up. This is a new season finale. This is a season finale we are talking about. So, of course, what is happening? But we are getting the Road So Far segment. And for those of you who have been with us, who have heard us describe this in the past, basically what happens is instead of showing like previously on, it's like a previously on segment, but instead it says the road so far, and then Carry On Wayward Son plays, and then it's intercut with the boys and other characters saying like, I only have a year to live. I'm Dean, and I made a deal with a demon. Except he's not actually narrating it. I just think that he should. I would love for Dean to be like, so anyway, here's what's happening.
Isn't that what happens in the Winchesters when he's narrating from afar?
No, literally. I think that we need to do like a remastered Supernatural where it's all the same, but at the beginning of every episode, Dean does a little teaser. He's like, I remember when my dad went missing and I went to find my brother. Here's how it went. And it's like the first episode.
It's like the original Sailor Moon dub where they would do Sailor Moon says. Well, I'll also say the Road So Far segments, like, they do kind of get you. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I do like Supernatural. Like, they know how to edit their own AMV because
they are editing their own AMV because no one is editing the actual show. They were like, that's not true. Editors, if you worked on Supernatural, God bless you. You are doing God's work. But it's like, it's just funny because they're like, it tricks you into thinking the show is good because it shows you all the best parts.
Yeah, well, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not watching the show, as you should be, you can go and just watch all the Road So Far segments from the end of each season, and you'll get the general gist. The good part is also that they include clips from earlier seasons, and as it goes on, they include less from earlier seasons, but sometimes they'll throw one in there that's like, it just seems so non sequitur.
Yeah, like in the last like later seasons, like because right now we're only in season 3. If they throw something in from season 1, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, like season 1 was not that long ago, all things considered, and they're still kind of dealing with some of the same stuff from season 1. But it's like sometimes it'll be like in season like 13 and it'll be like, Dad's been on a hunting trip and he hasn't been back for a few days. And it's like, now where did that come from?
Listen, is the last episode of Supernatural probably one of the worst ever? Did I still cry in the Road So Far segment because they did eat that up? Absolutely. Because, anytime...
They fucking better. That's the best part of the show. They better make the Road So Far good.
Yeah, like, anyway. See, now you're just making me think about Dean doing Sailor Moon says.
Oh my god. Okay. I need to get into the episode. We open. It starts. We're here, baby. Full throttle. We see like first person point of view of someone running, and you hear like running through a forest, and it's bright as fuck. Like, it's really bright. And then we see it's Dean and he's running. And then we cut and you're behind Dean and it's clearly something is chasing him. And but the lens of which is like the point of view of whatever's chasing him does look like an iMovie filter. Like, it's so white. It's hilarious. Yeah. And it's so grainy, but it's like, oh, he's being chased by a hellhound. That's kind of what, if you were paying attention during the season, that's kind of what you can assume. So Dean is running, being chased by a hellhound, like through the woods. It's gaining on him. It jumps on him. He falls down and there's blood everywhere. And then he wakes up. His head is like resting on a book. He fell asleep on his desk. His head is like resting on a book about hellhounds. So it's clear that his mind has been possessed. He's been thinking about his demise that is coming soon. Sam walks up and stands next to him and is like, hey, you good? And Dean's like, no. And Sam's like, well, okay, Bobby actually just found a way to find Lilith, so let's go do it. Let's go find her. And Dean is like, you know what, Sam, why not? Like, how about instead, Senorita surveys us, and what's Spanish for donkey show? And Sam's like, okay, well, we're not going to do that. And Dean's like, no, but like, why do we have to do this? Like, this is kind of ridiculous. It might not work. He's basically saying, like, let's just chill out and let what's going to happen. It's clear that he's kind of like, doesn't want to put, not necessarily that he doesn't want to put the effort in, but that he is kind of over it. And Sam is like, hey, listen, it's gonna be okay. We still have 30 hours to figure this out. We are not gonna let anything bad happen to you. I'm not gonna let you go to hell. I promise. And is giving this reassuring sort of speech. And Dean looks up at him, and suddenly Sam's face like contorts. And it's clearly, just so you guys know, it's definitely some really good late 2000 CGI. But Sam's face looks all fucked up. And then Dean is like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I trust you.
This conversation is so funny because Sam's like, nothing's gonna harm you. Not alive around. And you're like, okay, but then he does go to hell, so this is hilarious.
Yeah. Spoilers. But the thing with this is that it's like, Dean does not look all that phased. So it's like, clearly he's been seeing things going on. Like, he's having some issues because the hellhounds are on his tail, I guess. So they walk into the other room, and Bobby has this like contraption set up that almost looks like the needle that you sway back and forth to draw pictures in the sand, like in those little Zen gardens.
Yeah. I'm like, is it
I'm talking about?
Yeah. I'm like, is it an astrolabe? Like, what is it? Like, we don't know.
He basically has this contraption that has a needle pointing down on a map, and they're talking. And
also, it's a map of the entire United States, so they're just assuming that Lilith is in the United States and in the continental United States, I should be clear.
Well, they know she is.
Okay.
They do know she is because she showed up in that, like, she had been following them.
Okay, I guess.
And she was coming, quote, from the West, as someone said earlier.
God.
So they know. But they're looking at this thing, and Bobby's like, yeah, I can figure out where she is. And Dean is like, yeah, or so you think we'll have like the city that she's in? And he's like, boy, by the end of this, we will have the street name.
And so it is never explained how or like why this is so accurate or whatever. He's just like, yeah, I found a ritual. Let's get to it. Yeah. And you're like, wait.
It's so random. It's like, how did he figure out? Like, Bobby is always figuring shit out off screen.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of having Sherlock flashbacks where Sherlock is like, I called one of my friends to figure this out, and doesn't actually let you solve the problem. Sherlock, get the fuck out of my brain.
It's H Bomber guy has entered the chat again to be like, so he just comes in with a smart fix and keeps it pushing.
Yeah. But unlike Sherlock, Bobby serves. So
this is a sentence that in 2012 would have been like dropping a bomb on Tumblr.com.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of dropping a bomb on Tumblr.com, I recently finally watched the 4 Doctor Who specials. And in them David Tennant has returned as the Doctor, and at one point he repels some otherworldly monsters using a line of salt. And again, that's a common thing in a lot of cultures, not weird objectively. But
if that had happened in 2012, if that thing had happened, everyone would have been like, is this a supernatural reference? When it's like, clearly it's not, but
yeah,
the girls would have found a way to make it so.
The gift sets would have been just off the shits. And here's the thing, it's not just in one episode, it's referenced across several of the specials and is a part of the plot line. I made a TikTok about this, and someone in the comments was like, well, it does mean that they could technically exist in the same universe because Dean is now traveling the multiverse according to the Winchesters, and the whole thing in the Doctor Who specials was that they let something in, wait for it, from the edge of existence where nothing exists, aka the empty, aka super hell, where Castiel gets. That's right, they are monsters from outside of the universe in existence.
Guys, we need the SuperWhoLock fanfic writers now more than ever. Like, we need them back now.
It was so dark, and I had to bring it up, and I won't say anymore. We already talked about Sherlock, so.
Anyway, oh my god, you're like, I had to bring it up in the middle of talking about something else. I'm sorry. No, but you're so right. Anyway, they have this device. Bobby starts speaking words in Latin, and this pendulum points to oh my gosh, I wrote down what the town was called. I cannot recall.
Is it New Harmony?
New Harmony.
Yeah.
Yes. It points to New Harmony, Indiana. So they're like, okay, we have to go there. So Bobby and Sam are like, all right, let's get going. And Dean's like, okay, I actually don't know about this, guys, because if we either go in prepared or not at all, because if we go in unprepared, we are going to die. And I don't want you guys dying when, I'm the one who's gonna die, and if we all go, we all die. So let's, not do that. And he's also like, we don't actually know how to kill her. We don't know who she is. We don't know how to, there's so many unknowns here. We could fuck ourselves. And Bobby says, Dean is bringing up some very, valid points about why this plan might not work. And Bobby's like, ain't you just bringing the room down?
I'm like, hey, Bobby, he's about to be dragged to hell in, 24 hours. Yeah, let him bring the room down.
No. It's so funny. But, Dean is like, no, I'm not doing this. This plan is ridiculous. We need to find something else. And Sam looks very dejected, and Bobby starts gathering his stuff and starts walking out. And Sam's like, where are you going? And he's like, well, to go find something else. And Sam is like, well, you know what? We should, and Dean's like, don't fucking say it. And he's like, no, well, I think it's our only option. And Dean is like, if you say summon Ruby, I'm going to be fucking pissed right now. And Sam is like, okay, but Ruby is the only option we have. She has a knife that we know can kill demons. And Dean is like, Sam, Ruby has lied to us from day one. She said she could save me, and then she said she couldn't, so she's been a liar this whole time. Maybe that's a bad idea. And Sam's like, okay, fine. So then the next scene is Sam summoning Ruby.
It's also, is this when they're like, oh, your little demon girlfriend? Is this when he says it?
I don't remember that.
I feel like he says it at some point, and then I remember being like, that's a mouse tool we'll use for later.
I don't think he says that. I don't recall.
Oh, okay. Maybe I dreamed that one up then.
Oh no, the Suby shipper is coming out.
I don't even know what that ship was actually called.
It's probably just called Sam Ruby or something. I feel like they were not creating creative ship names for stray people back in the day. Anyway, so it cuts to Sam, who has drawn a little triangle and put some powder in the middle, and he starts chanting in Latin, and then he lights it on fire, and he's just kind of standing there. And I don't know where he is. It almost looks like he's in an attic or a barn or something. It's where is he?
I think it's on Bobby's property. Also, I went on the shipping wiki, by the way, and it is called Suby.
I was right.
Well, I don't know if you're right because the ship, otherwise known as Winchester, they called Winbros. So, and they said,
so maybe not.
Okay, I also saw Duby.
Who is Duby?
Dean and Ruby.
Why was I like, that's such an obvious answer. I don't know why I couldn't see it. Maybe because the idea of those two together is so physically repulsive to me.
Yeah. I just saw Suby and Duby. Sorry, I can't. Anyways. They're in Bobby's fuck-ass barn. And speaking of a fuck-ass barn. That's for next time.
Don't bring up. There are so many fuck-ass barns because I forgot that Lazarus Rising takes place in a barn, and I thought you were talking about the barn he gets the rusty nailed in.
Everything important in the show happens in a fuck-ass barn.
Probably the same fuck-ass barn, honestly, talking about how sets are made.
Yeah, probably.
Anyway. Okay, so Sam does this little ritual. He's summoning Ruby. And at first, she doesn't appear. And he's kind of, like, let down. And then she's like, you know, your cell phone still work. Like, you could have called me. And he's like, oh my god, you're here. Hey. So what's the deal? Dean's, like, gonna die. What do I do? And she's like, what do you do? I've tried to, like, talk to you about what to do so many times, and you blew me off. And he's like, well, you did, like, lie to us because you said you could save Dean, and then you told him that you couldn't actually save him. And she's like, okay, I actually didn't lie to you because I can't save him, but you can. I said I know how to save him to you, but I told him that I couldn't save him. So see, it kind of, like, works. And Sam's like, well, that is kind of, like, not necessarily a lie, but it's still shitty. And she's like, yeah, well, I'm a demon, so manipulating is kind of part of the job. Which was so cunt of her to say.
Slays. She's like, God, you guys are so dumb. Keep up.
Yeah, but she's like, you can do this. And Sam's like, I can do this? What, you mean like my psychic powers that I had for a while in season 2? He doesn't say that, but that's, so you know. He's talking about his psychic powers he had in season 2. But he's like, those went away when Yellow Eyes died. And she is like, well, no, they actually didn't. They're just dormant. And now is the perfect time. If we hurry, we can probably stop her. She is basically on shore leave right now. And Sam's like, what is shore leave? What does that entail? And she's like, you don't want to know. And he's like, okay, so she has her guard down and she's on shore leave. And she's like, but he's like, so what do we, like, how can I stop her? And she's like, Sam, you just have to give in to this. Like, you have a God-given talent. Well, not a God-given talent, but you have abilities that you can use.
You know, Chuck was
laughing
to himself. As a reminder to those of you at home,
he was chuckling.
As a reminder to those of you at home, it is revealed later on that the story of Supernatural is just being written by God as his little fan fiction, and he is watching all this happen. So, you know,
spoilers.
Anytime anything happens, it is funny to think of Chuck being like, tee, I thought this was funny.
Which is also so funny, too, because it's like, clearly that was not the intention in these early seasons. It was clearly something that at the end they were like, oh, fuck, we're running out of things to write about. So, but it's like, it's one of those things that when you know it's what's happening, it completely recolors how you watch the entire show and makes all of the stakes seem so low. Like, it's like this whole, everything that happens, it feels so pointless because they have retroactively made it pointless.
And between that and the rusty nail, it's... Oh, Dean's going to hell. Okay, well, R.I.P. to hell, but a rusty nail did it better.
Yeah. But Sam is like, okay, so I have this power. Why didn't you tell me this before? And she's like, well, because I needed to wait. I couldn't have said anything right away. And he's like, because you were waiting till I was desperate. And this is what made me desperate. And she's like, yeah, hit the nail on the head there, buddy. As she is saying this, and as Sam is taking it in, Dean walks up, and he's like, oh, if it isn't our slutty little Yoda, because she's basically telling Sam, like, oh, you just need to work for it and believe in yourself. And Dean uttering the phrase, slutty little Yoda, I'm like, I don't know why you're adding slutty little, like a descriptor, because Yoda is already those things.
If you don't listen to RuPaul's Pod Race, you may not know about the comic with Yoda's slutty little toes.
Yeah, they're Yoda with his fat ass and his slutty little toes.
I think
we'll post a picture of it. We'll post a picture of it with the episode releases, so you guys can know what we're talking about.
If you showed that picture to Dean Winchester, what would he say?
I think he would be like, "Oh, can you please excuse me for a minute?" Anyway, so Dean walks up and he's like, "Girl, I knew you'd be coming." And Sam is like, "What?" And he's like, "Well, obviously I knew you weren't going to listen to me." And Dean is like, "Sam, you cannot listen to this. She has lied. She is not trustworthy." And she's like, "Your brother is carrying a bomb inside of him, and we'd be stupid not to use it." And I was like, oh my god. Okay, Gale of Waterdeep reference. Anyway, so they start, like, arguing. And Dean's like, "No, don't listen to her. She wants you to be her little Antichrist superstar." And at first I was like, did he just make a Jesus Christ Superstar reference like at Andrew Lloyd Webber? And then I realized that is a song by Marilyn Manson. So, at first I thought we won so hard because I was like, Dean Winchester making possibly one of the gayest Broadway references he could make.
Yeah.
And that's actually not true. Jesus Christ Superstar, all things considered, not one of the gayest shows ever, but
I mean, it's up there. The fact
that he would know anything about musical theater made me very excited, but then he's just referencing.
We know he does know things about musical theater because later on in the 200th episode that is a musical, I think there are things said, I can't remember. I think he does know things about musical theater because there are things uttered later on. Listeners,
the fact that it's funny. I feel like I must have known that the 200th episode was a musical, but I don't think I really processed it until right now. What the fuck? Okay, we'll deal with that later.
That's a problem for later us.
Yeah, don't tell me. Okay. But, so Dean, they're, like, arguing, whatever. And Ruby is like, we need to do it now, because if we don't do this, like, if we don't do something about it now, like, if we don't go there now, we're gonna be fucked. And Dean's like, no. And they're, like, arguing, and it gets heated, and he smacks her. And she's like, bitch. So she punches him, and they're, like, beating the fuck out of each other. And Sam's like, guys, stop fighting. But then he's like, oh, Ruby's beating the shit out of Dean. So he goes to swing, and she kicks him to the fucking curb. But she wrestles Dean, like, into a corner, and then, like, he pushes away and, like, pulls back. And he's like, huh, looking for this? And he pulls out her knife that kills demons. And I was like, okay, got that from Bella. Sticky hands, sticky fingers. And Ruby, like, comes to grab it from him, and she can't, and she looks up and realizes she's stuck in a devil's trap. And she's like, oh my god, you're so stupid. You are so stupid. Seriously, you cannot be doing this. And they both go, and I guess they're in a basement. They're in Bobby's basement, which is, like, a really well-lit basement. But they start going up the stairs. And she's like, you're gonna leave me here? Fine, you're stupid, you deserve to rot in hell, and I wish I was there to see it. And I was like, okay, serve.
Yeah, she served, and I truly, no notes.
Yeah, so they go upstairs, and they're sitting, and they're kind of talking, and Dina's like, okay, well, I got you the knife, and that's what you wanted. Now, I still think this plan is stupid. And they have this conversation where Sam is like, I don't understand. I feel like you're giving up. Like, we have the knife. We know exactly where she is. We can go stop her. And Dean is like, we have to stop doing this. We can't do this. We can't mess this up again. And he said that earlier in the earlier conversation where he said, we can't mess this up again. And Sam's like, you keep saying that. What does that mean? And Dean's like, think about it. Every time one of us is on the line, we do something stupid. Like, when I was gonna die, Dad made a deal to save me. And now I'm gonna die because I made a deal to save you. And I don't want you to do the same for me. We are each other's weakness. And all of the demons know it. And Sam's like, but we're family. And Dean's like, yeah, but everyone knows that. And they're gonna keep trying to exploit that. And it's not gonna end well. We need to stop, quote, we need to stop being martyrs, stop spreading ourselves for these demons. If we go down swinging like Dad taught us.
listening to that speech now,
Yeah.
fucking harrowing. Because he says that speech and you go, that's it. That's the thesis of the show. We can pack it up. We don't need to watch anymore.
Yeah.
And then he says that part and you're like, and that was the last episode. That was the Rusty Now.
Yeah.
No, but it's very wild when he says that. And I'm like, so my anger about the series finale is back. It's back.
Yeah.
It's both funny because you're just like, oh, honey, you're going to keep having this conversation and saying that about 100 more times. But then it's also very sad because then you're like, oh, I know it ends. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but then they have this, Dean says that raw as fuck line, and Sam is like, okay, I get it, but you're right. Let's do this our way. And we won't do this through me using any weird powers or anything. We can go after Lilith now. She's on shore leave, according to Ruby. So we should just do it. Let's do it our way. And Dean's like, well, I practiced that speech. And what the hell does a demon do for fun? Like, what are they doing on shore leave? So they agree to go. As Dean asks this question, we cut to this very idyllic neighborhood, and it says it's in New Harmony, so where Lilith is. And we see this old man, and there's another old man, like they're both at their mailbox, and they're like, oh, hey, how you doing? And I wrote down in my notes, is this a neighborhood of Joe Biden's? Because it felt like there was a lot of Joe Biden activity going on here. But this old guy just looks just like Joe Biden. It was weird. Anyway, but the one neighbor says to the other, he's like, oh, hey. On the mailbox of the one of them, it says Fairmont. And the one neighbor's like, oh, how you doing? He's like, oh, we're all right. And the non-Fairmont neighbor is like, oh, so how's your granddaughter? He's like, oh, if you'd believe it, she's homesick today. And the other neighbor is like, oh my gosh, that's such a shame. We'll give her a big hug from us. Tell her to feel better. And he's like, yeah, we'll do. And the neighbor, whose last name is Fairmont, goes back up into the house. And the other neighbor realizes that he's left like a crumpled piece of paper with him, and he opens it up and it says help us on it.
It's about to get dark.
Also, update, it is Fremont, not Fairmont. That's on me. It's not really important, so I didn't remember. But anyway, we cut inside of this house, and there is a dead body of an older woman in like the foyer, and we see a woman making a birthday cake in the kitchen, and this older man, this grandfather, comes in and he's like, where is she? And the woman, the mother, is like, she's upstairs playing with Freckles, who is a pet. And the dad is like, we have to do something. And then this little girl comes downstairs. She's like a very cute little blonde girl with a pink dress on, and the dress is completely covered with blood on the front. The mom is like, oh, honey, what happened to your dress? And she's kind of like trying to hold it together, clearly on the verge of tears. And she's like, oh, Freckles was mean to me. Just like that babysitter. So you can assume the woman who is dead in the front of the house is the babysitter who she has killed. And the dad is like, oh, okay. And she's like, Daddy, do you want to go outside and play with me? And he's like, well, why don't we go get you changed so the neighbors don't see the blood on your dress? And she's like, that's a great idea. I love you, Daddy. And she runs up and hugs him and gets blood all over his clothes. And he's like, honey, would you consider, maybe at some point, letting us go? And she's like, why? Don't you love me, Daddy? And he's like, no, of course I do. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. That's crazy. It's ridiculous. I don't know why I said that. And she's like, oh, Daddy, you're so funny. So it's clear that this child is playing the role of a child and is holding this family hostage.
It's just this entire concept is very funny to me because it's like you in the world of Supernatural, you become a demon if you've made a deal and then you get tortured in hell for so many years, you become a demon and you get out and you're a very powerful demon of some kind and you're like, you know what I'm going to do with my time out of hell? Torture a family and pretend to be a child. And like, I guess it's kind of cunty of her. But at the same time, it's like, there's so much more fun things to do. What are you doing? Like,
yeah. And it's like, I also just like the idea that because Ruby was like, yeah, this is what she does for shore leave. It's like, this is her being like, you know what would be the most fun thing to do? Torture a family. I'm like, girl, couldn't you have at least tortured someone who's worth torturing?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess she's a demon, so that's kind of like the point. But
you did say it was a neighborhood of Joe Biden's. So
oh, /J.
/J or /SRS. Who can say?
So we cut. Sam and Dean are getting into the car and clearly trying to sneak away. And Dean goes to turn the car on, but the ignition isn't working, and we hear it not turn on. And then Bobby shows up with the like distributor cap that you need to turn the car on in his hands, and he's like, "So where you guys think you're going? Where are you going?" And they're like, "Oh, we were just," and he's like, "Oh, so you guys are gonna go, you were gonna go without me?" And Dina's like, "Bobby, we don't want you to like get killed or anything." And he's like, "Family doesn't end with blood, boy."
An iconic Supernatural line. One of the best parts of the episode is really Bobby slaying, but like that scene gets put into a lot of the Road So Far montages. That scene is that thing is quoted so much. That like I will say in the last episode of Supernatural, when he is in heaven and speaking to Bobby, you think back to this moment. You think back to this fucking moment. I will say, Bobby being like, "Yeah, we're like family." Mayhaps I cried.
Not even we're like family. He's like, "We are family," which is like, it's too good. But Bobby's like, "Family doesn't end with blood, boy. Now get in the car. I'll follow." And he hands him the distributor cap, and he's like, "And don't be stopping to pee every 10 minutes."
When objectively, like, the older guy is probably gonna need to stop to pee more.
No, Bobby's got a system. Do you think he's got a bottle?
Yeah, he does.
Sorry, that's disgusting. That's disgusting, but I feel like Bobby is very he's very pragmatic.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I have to do what I have to do.
Yeah.
Which is honestly just such a great scene. Bobby, I feel like Bobby, we need more of him. And I feel like we were severely lacking Bobby in this season. There was a lot of things in this season where like, oh, Bobby called, but we didn't actually hear Bobby.
Yeah.
But it's like he was there.
Yeah.
So I just forget. He's just such a good character. The other thing that happens is when Bobby is like, "Oh, you're going to go without me? How long have you been having hallucinations?" And Dean's like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "Oh, really? Because when hellhounds are chasing you, you have hallucinations." And he's like, "Okay, how'd you know?" And he's like, "Because I'm smart."
Again,
so iconic.
Deus Ex Machina, Deus Ex Bobby. How does he know this shit?
Deus Ex Bobbyna.
That's got to be the title of the episode.
So Dean like admits he's seeing things. Whatever. We cut. We're on the car ride. First of all, they are driving from, I assume, Bobby's salvage yard, which is in Sioux Falls in South Dakota. They are driving from Sioux Falls to New Harmony. And I looked it up. And on a day where there's no traffic, it is a 10.5-hour drive. So, and I know these boys drive a lot, and I feel like it's not, like, maybe we need to start doing it on this show, is to say, like, where were they in the episode before and how long their drive would be. But I think it's hard because we don't know how much time has passed between every episode regularly. But we do know that at the beginning of this episode, which took place in the evening, Dean had 30 hours. So we can assume the episode started at what? What would that be? Like 6:30, 6 p.m. the day before Dean is set to die.
Yeah.
So 6 p.m. So they talk to Ruby the next morning. So then we know that they do a 10-hour drive, and then they only have like 5 hours left. So I'm like, they have just been moving and shaking a lot. I'm just like, they did a 10-hour drive straight through, is the crazy thing.
They're nuts. They're bonkers.
I guess that's what it's like when you're from the middle of the country. Us East Coast elites, we don't get it because everything's so close together here.
Yeah.
They're doing this long as fuck drive, and Sam is kind of like trying to talk to Dean to have like a bonding moment. And he's like, well, what do you need? Like, what do you want to? And Dean's like, you know what I need? I need this. And he turns on the radio and he starts pumping the radio up. And Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi starts playing. And Sam is like, Bon Jovi? That's what you need? And he's like, you know what? Bon Jovi rocks. On occasion. And then,
fellas, is it gay to like Bon Jovi? Like,
is it gay to be from New Jersey?
Like, I didn't know that was a thing that's like embarrassing to admit. Like, suddenly Bon Jovi fan derogatory. Like, I'm like, this is a pretty normal thing that white guys like. Like,
oh, that's too good. So Dean starts singing along, starts jamming. It's like, come on, Sammy. So Sam starts kind of singing along too, and they're doing like, it's a really sweet moment where they're both singing like Dead or Alive, and it's kind of too good. It's probably one of the best scenes in this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It feels like the most like fleshed out scene.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like the only scene that they were like, okay, they had a plan.
Yeah.
It almost feels like it was like a scene that they wanted to put in when they conceptualized either this arc or conceptualized like something. Like, it's clear this was an idea.
Yeah, they were like, there has to be a moment with Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi. There has to be. And fit it in there somehow.
Yeah, but Sam is singing and he's like, Dead or Alive. And as Sam is kind of getting into it, Dean kind of looks out the window of the car and gets this almost like bittersweet look on his face. And it's kind of clear that he is like, oh yeah, this is like the last moment that I'm going to have with my brother where we're not in the shitter.
And you're like, oh, maybe I'm sad.
As they're driving, you see from behind the Impala, I noticed it earlier, but it's like one of the tail lights is out. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to get pulled over. And then what fucking happened? Like 2 minutes later, they got pulled over. And Sam was like, what is happening? And Dean's like, I have a tail light out. And Sam's like, girl, okay, well, so the police officer gets out of his car and he moseys on over and he's like, license and registration. And Dean hands him the thing out the window, kind of without really looking at him. He's like, sir, are you aware that your tail light is out? And Dean's like, oh yeah, I was actually just thinking of getting it fixed. Here, excuse me. And he gets out of the car and stabs the dude in the throat with Ruby's knife.
Dean Winchester says ACAB once again.
Mm-hmm. That's what I wrote. I wrote that down. But he basically just kills this cop in cold blood. And Sam is like, what the fuck are you doing? And then he realizes, like, the cop, his eyes, like, do this thing. Like, when they kill a demon in this show with the knife, they have almost, like, this light bulb burning out visual. So Sam's like, oh my God, that was a demon. And then Bobby, who is tailing them, pulls up and, like, runs up. He's like, what is going on? And Dean's, like, standing there. And Sam's like, Dean just killed a demon. How'd you know? And Dean's like, I just knew. I can, like, see things. Like, I know I've been hallucinating since the Hellhound started chasing me, but this was different. Like, I could see that he was a demon. So that's just, like, a fun power
I just think it's interesting.
Dean has.
I just think it's interesting that, so the problem with the demon knife is that instead of exorcising someone, you kill the vessel as well. But in this case, Dean didn't give a fuck because the vessel was a cop, so
yeah, he said, I don't care. We do not care.
And who gave a fuck? And neither do I. So
yeah. But so the next scene is them, like, hiding the cop car in the woods by covering it with sticks. Like, it looks like a big, ugly shrub. It's too good.
They're so dumb. Like,
yeah. But Bobby is like, oh, so, like, it makes sense because the hellhounds are chasing you. Like, you're close to hell now. You can see demons. It might come in handy. And while he's trying to explain what Dean is seeing, Dean's like not understanding. He's like, okay, let me play. You're almost hell's bitch, so you can see hell's other bitches. And Dean's like, okay, you didn't have to say it like that.
He's like, hold on, let me translate this for gay people. So he's like, but it's quite funny because Dean is very selectively smart. Like, for scenes like this, they'll be like, wait, he has to be stupid so we can do something funny. But then there's other times where he has to be smart. And this is one of those cases where it's like, Dean's characterization depends on the day.
Yeah. But then, but Bobby's like, yeah, you're piercing the veil. And I was like, piercing the veil of death through the power of gay love? Anyway.
Because!
Like, yeah, you're piercing... Bobby's like, you're piercing the veil. He's coming very close to piercing the veil of death through the power of gay love. But Bobby's like, yeah, you're piercing the veil. Like, you're gonna be hell's bitch. So it might be a helpful skill that you can now, like, see who is actually demons. And I had a thought. Because I know Dean was like, yeah, I've been having hallucinations. And I thought about in the beginning of the episode when he saw Sam and his face was all fucked up.
Yeah, that's what he was hallucinating.
I know it said he was having hallucinations, but he can also see demons.
Oh, because Sam came back wrong.
Because Sam came back wrong.
Oh, and you know, at first I thought that was just an oversight, but because they didn't get to do this whole season, because they said this season was supposed to both cover that Sam came back wrong and that Dean was leaving at the same time.
Yeah, and Sam has these, like, demonic powers still that are just dormant. I'm just saying, that may have been a smart writing choice. A smart, subtle writing choice, which is not something that Supernatural does very often.
It probably would have not been subtle at all had they had more time, but considering that it wasn't, I think, oh, wow. And I bet he was thinking it was a hallucination because he was like, well, Sam isn't a demon, so. Oh. Yeah. Oh, wow. Spoilers.
Or even worse, because when that happens to Sam, he kind of doesn't react. I'm like, what if Dean is like the king of denial, because I'm a little bit like, what if he realized that was like wrong with Sam, but was like, I can't do this.
That's
like,
a problem for later me.
No, literally. He's like, well, I'm gonna go to hell. So.
Well, and that's why he didn't want to go, because he didn't want Sam to... that does become a big part of Sam's plot, and the Dean doesn't want Sam to give in to the power to become the Antichrist. He's like, you don't have to do this, whatever. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
I know. Interesting.
That's so...
nuance in my Supernatural?
Wow.
So then we cut. They have pulled into this cul-de-sac, and they are looking, like, through binoculars into these people's house, and they see... We also see a scene inside of the house where this little girl, who we know is being possessed by Lilith, is sitting down to dinner with her family, so the grandpa, the dad, and the mom. And they're sitting there, and the little girl, the mom puts down the cake she was making earlier, and the entire table is covered, like, with dessert for dinner. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's my birthday every day! Yippee! So she's, like, hanging out, they're doing whatever. The parents are clearly terrified. And she's like, la la la, Grandpa, why did you go next door for help? And the grandpa's like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, I think I do. It's because you don't love me anymore, right? And he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking. Of course I love you, absolutely. And she looks at her parents and she's like, did you know about this? And the dad's like, no. And the grandpa looks at the mom and he's like, do something. And the mom's like, no, I didn't know about this. And she's like, I don't think I like you anymore, Grandpa, and snaps his neck, like, by holding her hand out. Snaps his neck, and he falls face first into his food. And then we cut, and we see Dean, Sam, and Bobby looking in with binoculars, and kind of, I think they have started looking right after this happened, because they see the grandpa dead, and Dean looks at the little girl, and he's like, oh, yeah, oh my god, yeah, that is definitely her. She looks fucking crazy, because we don't see it, but he is seeing her true demon face. But he's like, oh yeah, that's her. She's fucked up. They are looking around they see that there's like kind of neighbors milling about, and he's like, okay, so we need to come up with like a plan, because that neighbor over there and that mailman who's out at 10 p.m., like all of these people are demons. Like this entire neighborhood is demons. She is protecting herself. But because they have hex bags that Ruby gave them a while ago, she doesn't see them coming. So they still have somewhat of an element of surprise.
I did not know that that was a feature of hex bags until recently.
Yeah.
I was like, huh.
I don't know if it is. I think, because I don't know if they do that again. I think it just kind of ended up being a like, fuck, we need a way for them to get there and we don't have time to write an actual solution.
Yeah, it was very wild and crazy.
So they're like, okay. They are like, okay. Bobby's like, I have a plan. But before they do anything, Dean is kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. And Sam's like, what do you mean? We have an opportunity. Like, now is our time. And he's like, I don't know, but that's like a little girl. So he cares about the vessel when it's a little girl, but not when it's a cop.
Yeah. Dean slays. He slays, I fear.
The other funny thing is that Sam and Bobby do not give a fuck. They're like, clearly she is like fucked up and crazy. If we have to do this, we have to do it. No one likes it. And Dean's like, okay. And I'm like, wow, you guys are really skirting around morality.
Yeah.
Okay. So we see Dean and Sam ambush this mail carrier and stab him with the knife, and he dies. And they kind of are sneaking up like behind houses and taking out demons that are in the area. And then we see Bobby, and he's holding like a rosary, and he is saying a blessing over like the pipes for the neighborhood. And then he drops the rosary in and shuts it.
I have a question about that. So that establishes that to make holy water, you just have to pray over some water. But according to, depending on whatever specific churches, a priest has to do that. So are we saying Bobby is ordained, or are we saying that we're not following Catholic rules? Like, what's the rules here?
We had this exact conversation when John did this in the church a couple seasons ago. I think, or in season 2, I think it was.
Yeah.
I think that we just have to admit that holy water works different in the supernatural universe.
Yeah, well, because there are some times where they're like, oh, we have to get a priest to bless it. I think they just kind of pick and choose. Because otherwise, you know, I don't know. Because sometimes they're like, well, let me drop a rosary in the water and then it'll be blessed. Remember when they did that?
Yeah.
But now you could just pray over
in the toilet bowl.
Yeah. Like, it's a little, the magic system is a little, I got some questions.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, they're playing fast and loose with every religion, so at least it's equality.
It's equal opportunity.
So Sam and Dean are kind of doing their little fighting thing, and then Dean suddenly gets his face pressed up against a metal fence, and there's someone behind him, and it's Ruby, and she's like, I'll take my knife back now, thank you. And Dean is like, oh my god, I didn't realize how much of an ugly broad you were, because he can see her demon face. And I was like, Dean, come on now. And then in this next conversation, they call her a bitch and a slut like so many times. I'm like, you guys are so misogynistic. It's sick. It's sickening. It's so unnecessary.
Like, you already beat the shit out of each other. Like, do you have to be misogynist too? This is very much a thing of like, and who was writing this? Because I can tell between episodes.
Yeah, and the answer is Eric Kripke himself.
Well,
it's been a while since we've had a Kripke written episode.
That's true.
But Ruby is like, give me back my knife. I want my knife back. And Sam shows up and he's like, oh my god, Ruby, hey. And they all start arguing. And she's like, okay, we have to like, this is ridiculous. Give me back my knife. It's too late. Like, you guys already fucked it up. We missed our opportunity. And Sam's like, okay, well, we're gonna finish the job, bitch. And then as she's like kind of getting ready to attack them, a basically huge swarm of, it's like huge, I say huge, it's huge for network TV. It was like 20 people, start running up to swarm them. So they're like, oh fuck, we're fucked. So they run up to the house that Lilith is in, and Sam starts picking the lock, and Dean's like holding the knife. And then as it's like Sam is not able to pick the lock, and then all these demons are swarming them, and then the sprinkler system in the neighborhood, all of them turn on, and it's holy water. So these demons are all running, and then they're like, oh! Which was such a good shot. Honestly, I thought that was really slay. I love that.
Bobby's slay is so big. Like he he was like, this is gonna really hit, and then it did, and then it fucking did.
Mm-hmm. So they enter the house, they go inside, and as they're walking around, they're whispering, and they look down and they see the babysitter dead on the ground, and they see the grandpa dead in the dining room, and they're like, okay, well, this is definitely the right place. And then we see this really interesting shot that almost felt like a first Resident Evil game shot, where it was like from a fixed perspective, but it's kind of like a fixed perspective, but then it also becomes first person. But we see Dean and Ruby walk forward, and then suddenly the camera starts going towards Dean, and Dean turns around, and it's the dad. And the dad is like freaking out, and he's like, oh my god. And Dean covers his mouth, and he's like, okay, hey, we're here to help. Where is your daughter? And he uncovers his mouth, and he's like, she's upstairs in her room. My wife was reading her a bedtime story. And a little earlier in the episode, we had seen the mom reading the daughter a bedtime story lying in the daughter's bed. And she's like, do you want me to read it again? I've already read it 26 times. And the daughter's like, again. And she's like, okay. So she reads it, and she's like, there was once a princess, but there was like the story was something that was like, oh, there was once a princess, but the town was the town was like being attacked by a dragon that demanded a blood sacrifice of children, and it was like this crazy fucked up children's bedtime story. But anyway, so the dad's like, yeah, she's upstairs reading a bedtime story, and Dean's like, okay, you need to go downstairs and cover all of the entrances with salt, okay? And he's like, not without my wife. And he's like, yes, without your wife. And he's like, no. And then Dean just punches him and knocks him out and goes to put him in the basement and gives Sam the knife. So Sam and Ruby go up the stairs and are kind of like looking around, slowly opening doors and looking in. Ruby goes into one room, and Sam goes down the hallway and opens the door and sees the mother, the shape of the mother and the little girl, Lilith, in the bed, and it's surrounded by like a pink canopy, like a sheer canopy. So Sam slowly walks over, and I noticed at this point he's holding the gun like a knife, or the knife like a gun, which is really funny because I'm like, that's not, I don't think, how you hold a knife, but okay. But he's walking up, and he slowly grabs the canopy and slowly starts sliding it over. And he sees the mother's face, and the little girl's asleep, and the mother is like crying, and she's like, do it. Like, kill her, because it's clearly not her daughter anymore. So Sam pulls up the blade, and he's getting ready to stab her. And it's this really like hectic, tense scene. It's probably one of the better done scenes in this episode, where the mother is like slowly increasing volume, but she's whispering, she's like, do it. And Sam, it's a close-up shot of his face where he's like, oh, fuck, I know she's a demon, but I have to stab, like, a 7-year-old girl right now. And as he's finally about to do it, Dean runs in and grabs his arm and is like, don't do it. She's not Lilith anymore. And the little girl wakes up, and she starts crying, and she's like, oh my god, mommy, what is going on? And the mom is like, I'm here, baby, I'm here, whatever. And it's like, luckily Dean was there because he can see demons, and was like, no, don't kill this child. So it was #fucked up.
And at this point in the episode, you're like, okay, so we're worrying about Dean, and we're worrying about Lilith, and Ruby's here, and we're like, there's so many pieces, and they got this family, and then you're like, oh my god, it's just there's a lot happening. You're like, wait, aren't there hellhounds coming for Dean? You're like, we don't have time to unpack that all right now. And then you're like, like, it's so hectic.
Well, guess what we will have time to unpack right now. And when I say we have time, it is like nowhere near a sufficient amount of time to deal with this. This is all happening given in the last, literally, I looked at my like at the timestamp, this is happening in literally the last 7 minutes of the episode, so I'm about to say a lot of things.
No, which is why I cannot emphasize enough. The pacing of this episode is literally insane. Like, it's you're like, wait, huh? Like all the beginning stuff that we described took such a long time that you're like, huh?
And it was like they put all of the talking at the beginning of the episode, which is not like bad. Like, it's definitely not the worst paced episode of Supernatural. And the pacing, again, isn't even necessarily bad. It's just weird.
It's so odd. It's so odd.
It's strange. So we cut, they're back down on the main floor, and the girl and the mom and the dad have been reunited. And Dean is like, okay, go into the basement. Do not come out, whatever you do. So they go downstairs, and Sam is like, okay, what do I have to do? And Ruby's like, what? And he's like, what do I have to do? Like, I will do anything. You said you can save Dean. You said I just have to embrace my power. Whatever, I'll do it. And Dean's like, no, dude, don't do that. And Ruby's like, Sam, it's too late. Like, we needed time to do this. You needed to listen to me when I first came to you, and it's too late now. We don't have time. Like, it's over. He's going to go to hell. He's like, what am I supposed to do? You can't go to hell. And Dean says, quote, keep fighting. Take care of my wheels. Remember what Dad taught you, and remember what I taught you. And I was like, oh.
It's really getting the end of the series, isn't it?
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, as he's saying this, the clock strikes midnight. And Dean and Sam are both crying. And then Dean looks up and he hears the sound of wolves howling. It's the hellhounds. And then the windows break, and Dean, Sam, and Ruby run into like this office and barricade the doors. And Dean puts down the, what is it called? The goofer dust?
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, because it's like a voodoo thing.
Oh my!
That we established from an earlier episode.
I forgot that was in this episode. Damn.
Yeah. So they put down the goofer dust. And I'm like, yeah, it's not appropriative at all. But they put that down along the doorways and the windows, and they're like banging on the hellhounds are like banging on the doors, and Ruby's like, okay, this is not gonna hold forever. Sam, give me the knife. I'll try to fight them off. Sam is like, okay, yeah, wait, what? And Dean's like, oh my god, that is not Ruby. And Sam's like, wait, what? And he's like, oh, guys, that is not... Uh-oh. And then she's like, oh, okay, you got me. And she puts up her hand and pins Sam to the wall and throws Dean against a desk, and her eyes become white, and it's revealed that she is Lilith. And Sam is like, where's Ruby? And Lilith suddenly like takes this little girl demeanor, but is still in Ruby's host. So she's like, she was a very bad girl, so I sent her far away. And then she walks over to Sam, and Sam's like, please, I'll do anything to save my brother. I'll make a deal, whatever. And she goes up and she kisses him. And it's like, your lips are soft. Still using this very childlike voice. And it's very weird and unnecessary and gross. It's kind of giving the Born Sexy Yesterday trope. Yeah. Because she's in this adult body, but is like, it's like, okay, Lilith is technically an adult. Like, not an adult, but Lilith is technically like has been alive for a really long time. So it's not like she's an actual child. But because she has like the veneer of a child, it's very weird. Yeah. It's very weird. And
like we were talking about earlier, is it like she just like... A lot to unpack here that if I did unpack, I'd probably get... anyway, a lot... It's just very...
It's weird.
Again, it's in the last 7 minutes of the fucking season finale, and you're like, huh? What the fuck?
Yeah.
This show does love to do really like, and what if they kissed, but like not in a fun way? And not even in a sexy evil way either, just in a kind of gross way, and you're like with the ceiling demon deals thing again. John Winchester, Azazel.
I just don't know how this is somehow like
necessary.
how this is somehow like, well, first of all, it's unnecessary, but it's somehow both assault and like
gross.
Like acting weird with a child, but it's like, it's not a child because she's not actually a child, but it's like, it's just so but she is a child, but she's not. But it's like, this is the same character, like, given she's in Ruby's body, so it's not like an actual, you're not actually seeing a child do this, but it's like, why do we need to do this? And why was she like, your lips are soft? What the fuck, bitch?
Yeah, it's
Eric Kripke, you are not seeing heaven.
Like, because a lot of people be like, oh, well, all the bad stuff came. I'm like, did it? Because what was this? What was it?
And then,
I'm sorry to Ruby. Point, sorry to Ruby. She's being slandered.
But at this point, she kisses Sam, and Sam's like, please, take me instead. And Dean's like, no. And Lilith's like, I won't agree to that deal because you can't offer me anything that I want. And Dean is still pinned to this desk. He's like, what's your plan? What, you gonna drag me to hell and kill Sam? And then you're gonna become the queen bitch? And she's like, I don't have to answer to Puppy Chow. And then walks away from Sam and pulls open the doors. And is like, have fun! And the hellhounds descend. And it's a fucking bloodbath. And it's like, there are clearly so many tubes throughout Jensen Ackles' outfit that have like fake blood vessels in them. Like, it's like, it is because we don't actually see the hellhounds. This whole, I did write down in my notes, I think it's very interesting that this final scene is kind of shot from Sam's perspective, so they didn't have to pay to either animate or create practical effects for the hellhounds because only Dean can see them. But we see like scratches appearing on Dean's chest and like random spurts of blood just happening. And it's kind of funny, and I was laughing, and it's not supposed to be funny because it's really dramatic.
It's supposed to be really sad and horrible, and you are laughing. Like, you're like...
I was laughing. But Sam is like... Jared's giving a performance, and far be it from me to you know, compliment Jared Padalecki, but he is going like, he's like, oh my gosh. Like, he's like screaming Dean's name, and it's really... Like, if it wasn't for how funny the visuals were, it would be really sad. So, Dean is getting... #killed. And then Lilith looks at Sam and she's like, okay, your turn. And she puts up her hand and her eyes glow white and her hand glows with this white light and it fills the entire room and the screen goes completely white for a second. And then the light dissipates. We see Lilith's face and she at first is kind of smiling, like smirking. And then she looks confused, and you realize that Sam is fine. Like, he's just sitting in the corner, and he realizes that he's fine, and he realizes that she is no longer, like, pinning him to the wall, and he grabs the knife to go, like, kill her, but she looks at him and is like, fuck no, and opens her mouth, and a black cloud flies out of her mouth, and she's gone, and Ruby's body collapses on the ground and is dead. Sam looks down and he sees that, and he sees Dean, and he runs over and he grabs Dean in his arms and he's crying and he's like saying like no, like he's just inconsolable. And then we pan. This is also a really fucking funny shot that was not supposed to be funny.
Yes!
But
it really is.
We see Dean's face and he's like dead, like he's no movement whatsoever. And the camera pans into his pupil. His pupil becomes hell. So hell is basically like it's basically just a bunch of chains suspended in the air. And then we hear Dean yelling and he's like, help me. And we see Dean and he's being suspended and he has like hooks connected to these chains that are just suspending him mid-air. And he's like, somebody help me. Sam! And then the episode ends. And that's it. That's the finale.
That's all of season 3.
We did it.
I'm like,
yeah.
Not to be that person. Not to bring it up now. But let me just... All I'll say is this. you know how when Sam prays to Castiel, he doesn't show up, but when Dean does, and then this ends with Dean screaming for help. I'm just saying.
Also, did I ever say what this episode was called? I just realized this is season 3, episode 16, and it's called No Rest for the Wicked. You know, the common phrase, which the Supernatural Wiki is like, this is a reference to the Cage the Elephant song. And I'm like, okay, so true. This episode, Handshake Borderlands, the first game, but I just was like, okay, sure. Anyway, sorry I'm saying the name of the episode so far into the show. Sorry if I've already said it. You can't ask me to remember.
Yeah.
It's just...
okay, wait.
It's so good.
This trivia, this is the second finale episode in the series where not all of the main characters' actors are present, with the absence of Lauren Cohan as Bella Talbot, and the second one was Carry On with the absence of Castiel and Jack. I'm sorry.
Moment of silence.
Do you mean Carry On, the final episode of Supernatural? Where nobody was there because of the pandemic?
There was actually a very interesting fact, and I would like to say thank you to the Supernatural Wiki. And I'm going to quote them directly here, but they say, according to the book Supernatural, the official companion, season 3, the original vision for the final scene would have placed Dean in a, quote, really nasty, bloody slaughterhouse hanging from meat hooks, quote. Here, Dean would start screaming as shadows fall over him. Discussions between Eric Kripke, Kim Manners, and Ivan Hayden led to the decision to present, quote, one epic glimpse, quote, of hell. Through this, though the scene matched with the many versions of, quote, chains and people being ripped apart, quote, art director John Marcunick felt they should have made it, quote, a little more mysterious and dark, quote. He commented, quote, my opinion is the vaguer the better, because you let the imagination take over. People have different fears, and hell's such a personal torment, quote. I think that that's really funny, because I like that it's like, yeah, there was discourse about what hell looks like, and I just like this rogue art director being like, yeah, fuck what they wanted to do. My idea was better. I remember hell being way scarier the first time I watched this episode, because now I'm watching it, I'm like, I'm just laughing.
I think it's scarier in the beginning of Lazarus Rising, because they're panning out. Like, they're panning out, and then they're also, like, he was there for 40 years in his mind and his time, whatever. And, like, so what we see further of it, which isn't very much, whatever, but basically, like, slight spoilers, but the next episode in the next season, it picks up literally right where this leaves off. It picks up with Dean screaming in hell exactly where this leaves off. And it's literally, like, I think it was scarier there. That was where I was like, whoa, okay, maybe this kind of... the switch from this everything everywhere all at once kind of crazy bullshit that was happening here to Lazarus Rising is such an insane... Of course it made people crazy. Like, of course it did.
I do have a fun fact. This was the most watched season finale of the entire show.
I can imagine. Because people thought that the show was going to end.
Yeah. This season had an average of 2.74 million viewers.
Damn.
So this was, like, I think probably one of, like, the most viewed, like, per capita episodes of the show, or seasons of the show.
I mean...
So I'm like, that is yeah, I just think that's interesting.
That makes sense. I also... What I do find funny, and again, I don't want to talk about Lazarus Rising too much yet, what I do find funny is, like, they have just, you know, Sam, the whole Lilith situation, Bobby, they're all there, whatever, and in the next episode, none of that is addressed, or at least as far as I remember. It's so fun. They conveniently, I think she jumps out of Ruby's body, so I guess, and you're like...
It really is, like, clearly they were in the 11th hour in the writing room, and they were like, we have to wrap up this season. Like, oh, fuck. Like, because I think it's like, it's one of those things where, first of all, I think if there had been like 4 more episodes, it would have resolved this to maybe like, oh, we learn where Lilith is. We learn how Bobby learned how to find where Lilith is.
We learn what her motivations are.
Dean gets to sort of explain a little bit earlier on that he's like, maybe we shouldn't try to save me because we don't have a lot of time left, and I don't want to keep us martyring ourselves for each other. I think that that's like the one conversation that I feel like up until like, because the whole thing was Dean being like, I don't want to die. Like, he just came to that realization.
Yeah.
And I kind of would have liked to see his genesis from being like, yeah, I don't want to die, to being like, maybe dying is the only thing I can do in this moment.
Because literally that switch happens in one fucking episode.
Yeah, and not even just in one episode, like literally in like 30 minutes.
And you're like, huh, what?
Yeah.
This is a case study in they did what they had to do. And
like, it's not bad. All things considered, it could have been way worse.
Yeah, absolutely. With the Hellhounds, I kept thinking about the later episodes with the Hellhounds where Dean's wearing the glasses. Remember?
No.
To be able,
I don't remember that at all.
To see the Hellhounds.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember that at all.
Maybe that was from one of the shitty seasons. I don't remember.
I blacked out a lot of this show.
Yeah,
so.
well, what else is there else to say except for you guys have been along the ride with us for the entirety of Supernatural sans Destiel. Now the real TV can start.
Yeah, the real TV, which is ironically maybe one good season before it gets really bad. I will also say a fun fact about season 3. Well, so, you know, Bella, Lauren Cohen was like one of them. It was one of the main cast members for this season, right?
Yeah.
Like, she was a season main cast member. This is the first and only season to have a female actress in the main cast.
We're in hell. Wait, no, what about Ruby?
She's not in the main cast. She's supporting.
That doesn't make it...
Yeah.
And, or Meg in the first season.
Misha Collins was a supporting actor until, like, season 13.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
That was crazy. Because they had to keep not putting him in episodes or else he'd have to be a series regular. Which is why people were like,
yeah.
So no Castiel? Fuck this.
Like, yeah. No, but I'm just saying, like, I just think it's really funny because I was thinking it in this episode while I was watching it, where like Dean and Sam and Bobby are like talking, and I'm like, wow, there is really a distinct lack of women in this show. And I don't know why I was feeling it in this episode, but like, for some reason it was hitting me hard. And I was like, the only women that we ever get are like antagonists and constantly get called sluts and bitches.
Yeah.
Or they're in it for like 1 or 2 episodes. Like Ellen and Joe were there for like
Charlie
2 episodes. I don't want to talk about Charlie right now. I'll get emotional.
Well,
and then I'll start getting angry.
Yeah. No, well, and here's the thing is like season 3, like they clearly wanted to have more women in the cast. I think that's when they realized that a lot of women watched the show. So they were like, oh, shit. So they were like, okay, we have a main female character. We're introducing a new antagonist who's a woman. Like, we're going to have women. And then they were like, oh, wait a minute. And of course, so you're saying that the one that has the most women is the shortest season? Food for thought.
Interesting.
And then they did the perfect queer bait thing, the thing, which is, what if we replaced the very few female characters' relationships with a man, and he has this same weird relationship with them, which is, I show up sometimes and we flirt a little bit. Bye! That's basically what Castiel does for like a few seasons. He shows up. They don't know if they can trust his ass. There's a lot of times where the girls are fighting, and then he leaves, and then he's like, I gotta go. And I'm like, is that not how Ruby... Oh, wow. This is we can't talk about him yet.
This season is one that was like, it had so many really good moments in it.
Yeah.
And then so many just like,
puzzling.
Like, I don't feel like there were a lot of bad moments. It was mostly just weird or strange, but it can be explained by the strike.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay. All right.
It's also, you can also definitely tell that they were not sure if they were going to get picked up again, because a lot of the things that they had left, like the whole thing with Gordon and the whole thing with Agent Henriksen, where it was like stuff that they had planted early on, they were like, okay, well, we have to resolve basically everything that we have talked about in the show so far.
Yeah, which is what which was what causes so many problems later, because they've wrapped up so many things that they're like, shit, now what do we do?
Yeah, and then they were like, okay, we have to up the stakes and create these crazy
God sister.
What I love too about this show is that after this, it's like every season, because they're like, oh, every season the world is going to end. And you see this a lot. This is something especially that I think happens because of like the rise of superhero media. But it's like, because it's like, oh, at the end of the first Avengers movie, like the world was going to end. Well, the entire galaxy has to end in the next one. And then it has to, like, they have to keep upping the stakes because they think that's what keeps the viewers engaged. Yeah. Even though, in my opinion, like, it's going to be more about, like, I'm watching for the characters, I'm watching for a good story, not because I think the world is going to end. And I think Supernatural kind of falls into this hole where it's like they keep doing things that are fucking crazy, that they're like, oh, shit, we have to keep upping the stakes.
I do fear what, and we'll talk about this later. I think it's also just a thing of, because they are Bible fan fiction, once they get to the big bad, Satan, like, where do you go from, like, it's also very like, well, where do you go from there, to be honest? And some choices are made.
Yeah, choices are choicing.
Yeah. Our next episode, I'd like to apologize in advance.
Yeah, God bless you if you are still listening.
I want to say, like, that's the last time we're truly ever going to be happy.
Oh yeah, because it's like Lazarus Rising happens, and then all of the episode quality goes down, but it's like you get moments of Destiel where you're like, oh my god, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and then you go back to being just a completely shitty episode.
Yeah.
And like that's literally the entire show for the rest of it. And I mean, maybe I'll feel differently upon rewatching, because I think a lot of my perception of it is colored by the fact that like I was in such a dire time in my life when I was like, this show is one of those things where it was like the only good thing in my life, because I was a melodramatic teenager.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is the only thing that makes me happy. And then when I realized that part of it wasn't good, I'm like, oh, all of it's bad.
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe upon rewatching, I'll be able to find some, like, a nuanced perspective of like, some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's just average TV. But we'll see.
Yeah.
And I'm excited that we can now go on this journey, because I pretty distinctly remember seasons 1 through 3, because I've rewatched them so many times. So it's after this is when my memory really starts getting hazy, except for the major moments.
Yeah, except for being like, oh,
yeah.
I do forget that the first like few episodes of the next season are all focused on Castiel. Well, they're focused on Castiel, and they're focused on Dean's characterization. So
thank God someone's doing it.
because and I think that is what created such a monster amongst gay people.
You know, I want to say, guys, if you're a listener and you have decided to go watch Supernatural or you've already watched it, I was just thinking, so there's one thing that I think is actually really scary. And for those of you who might not be as online as we are, there's a website called AO3, which we've talked about on this podcast, which is where people can upload their fan fictions. And going into the Dean Winchester / Castiel tag raw is like with even with filters, like even with like trying to like you filter it by kudos, or you filter it by like, you know, getting rid of keywords that you don't want to see, it's still like a minefield. So if anyone has any like good fan fictions that they want to share, feel free. Our DMs are open, but also just like respond to our tweets or whatever. Just I'm not saying I'm desperate.
Our email address is open.
Like, I've been rewatching this show, and I'm like, dang, I wonder where the good Supernatural fanfiction is at. And none of you had better send me Twist and Shout. Do not send me Twist and Shout. I will start with that. If you know, you know. I will not add any more to that.
We talked about Twist and Shout enough with the Winchester. See, it's like a sickness. It's like a sickness.
Get out while you can. That's my advice.
I just want to say, thank you all for listening through 3 seasons. Oh my god. For more cursed supernatural content, you can follow us on social media at Mystery Spotcast on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Tumblr. You can ask us cursed supernatural questions in our TikTok Q&A. I think it's called Add Yours now, our Tumblr Ask Box, or by emailing us at themysteryspotcast@gmail.com. That is also where you can send us good Destiel fan fictions. Just letting you know.
Please, God. What? Who said that?
God, you mean Chuck? I hate myself.
No, I don't want Chuck's Destiel fanfiction. Get that fucker out of here.
Chuck's Destiel fanfiction,
I want the real shit.
Otherwise known as Supernatural.
No, I need the fanfiction written by a 19-year-old that has so many unnamed mental illnesses that they're unmedicated for. Those are the people whose Destiel fanfictions I want to read.
And English is their second language. Like, it's gotta be, like, you know, they were just in the hospital.
Yeah, they were just in the hospital and their house burned down and they just had a baby. And then they're like, sorry for all the delays. And then it's the most gripping, beautiful piece of writing you've ever read in your life.
Like, holy shit. If you enjoyed listening to us suffer, lose it, have some sort of breakdown, talk about the writer's strike, please rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever platform you're listening to. If there is a rate and review feature, please do it if you haven't already. And also tell a friend, like an MLM, and tell them to listen, and then tell them to, like, you know, tell somebody else, you know, like an MLM. It really helps people. We are also 2 of the co-hosts of RuPaul's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast, which has just returned from our long hiatus with a new series called RuPaul's Day Off, where we talk about non-Star Wars media. So if you are not a Star Wars person, great place to jump in. Our first episode of this series is about Megan.
Yeah, so it was a very fun episode. If you've seen Megan, or if you haven't seen Megan, go check it out. Listen, if you think we should do a Supernatural episode, you should at all of our co-hosts and tell them to let us do one. Yeah. Let us do guys, the Lazarus Rising episode is only going to be available on the RuPaul's Pod Race themes. You have to go over there that's a joke. It will be here. Yeah. Don't worry. I'm just kidding.
If you are listening to this, you should at every single member of RuPaul's Pod Race that is not us, and ask them for a RuPaul's Pod Race Mysteries Podcast crossover episode where we talk about Lazarus Rising. Make it happen. Like, we can justify it if the fans push for it. You know what I mean? Or any other. Maybe we'll talk about the Supernatural anime.
Ooh. Oh my god. I'm just saying, guys, I think we need to talk about the books. I think that for our first live show, we will talk about the books. So guys, if we can get up to enough listeners to have a live show, we'll talk about the books.
Oh god. This is so...
Not the companion guides, the actual novels that were released alongside Supernatural, the original stories.
Which are, additional little... If this was anime, they would be called light novels. Supernatural is anime. Anyways, see you 2 Tuesdays from now for more slaying people, queer baiting things, Lazarus Rising, the Supernatural business.